Okay, so welcome to the webinar. As I said, I'm Pippa Greenwood, Head of UK Trade at URICA. So today we're going to be discussing how supply chain funding can make your supply chain more resilient. So if you are on social media at all, please do connect with us via Twitter. We've got our Twitter handle, which is @URICA Limited and #EurekaMoment. So today what we're going to cover is the health of our supply chains, how liquidity creates resilience within supply chains, what supply chain funding is, and how supply chain funding improves liquidity in the supply chain. Now, I do want to apologize slightly because I'm a little bit under the weather, so apologies for that. So firstly, the health of our supply chains and the payment pressures. So there was no current research into payment pressure in supply chains. So back in 2016, URICA teamed up with YouGov to survey businesses. The main objective was to find out more about payment pressure in supply chain, whether businesses experience disruptions, and what impact supply chain breaks have on businesses. And finally, where would businesses invest in additional funds? How URICA did that, they created an index of a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the healthiest. What we did, we researched 1,253 respondents of businesses of all sizes in different industries. And what we did, we found that businesses were waiting for more than 60 days to receive payment on their invoices. While the index wasn't strong over any payment period, it does actually deteriorate as people get paid in between 31 and 60 days. It was showing a score of 5.7 out of 10. And when it actually goes beyond 60 days, it shows a 5.2 score. Finally, 31% of respondents say that they're experienced with great pressure when they get paid over 60 days. So first of all, the SCF index averaged at about 6.6 out of 10 across all sectors. But then when we did the research on the second round, it actually deteriorated by 6%, with construction showing the biggest drop. 1 in 3 businesses expected their supply chains to get worse, with more breaks in the supply chain. Now, if you do want to find any more detailed research on this, please do access a free copy at www.scfindex.com. Now, overall, the research showed, which was quite an obvious insight, that the later one gets paid, the greater the pressure on the supply chain, with 1 in 5 starting to feel the pressure when payments take more than a month. Now, there's many reasons why businesses fail, but obviously the most common reason is no cash in the business. Now, if a few large invoices don't come in for a few months, this could be a huge handbrake on the actual business. And if your supplier actually runs out of cash, this then presents a new risk to your business. Finally, if you actually don't have any visibility on your supply chain, so rather than just looking at the tier 1, but maybe the tier 2, tier 3, this is even a greater risk. So what we've got here is just economist Dr. John Ashcroft stating in our evidence that if there was a 10% improvement in supply chain financing, this would actually lead to 3% increase in growth and productivity. So therefore, what happened was various finance solutions were designed to alleviate payment pressures in the supply chain and give access to funding to more businesses. In 2015, the banks rejected most applications and actually only accepted 21% of businesses. This means that most small businesses will get underserved. Now, the alternative finance industry, thus, was growing and expanding, and in 2016, the industry showed a 43% year-on-year growth in this industry. If you or your suppliers don't meet the bank's criteria, it's likely that you'll turn to alternative finance due to the payment pressures that do exist in the supply chain. So nowadays, there's quite a few forms of of alternative finance. We've got supply chain finance, bridging loans, invoice factoring, equity crowdfunding, invoice discounting, crowdfunding, business loans, peer-to-peer lending, and asset-based finance. And that's just a few out of many. What we're going to do today, we're going to discuss specifically supply chain finance versus supply chain funding. So traditionally, invoice discounting was for the masses, whereas supply chain finance was reserved for investment-grade businesses. It was difficult or even impossible for businesses to grow with invoice discounting, as debt is the Achilles heel for businesses. It's very difficult for them to grow. The financing of the entire supply chain is needed, and actually financing of the integral supply chain. So let's just go back a step and have a look at supply chain finance. So traditionally, this is initiated by the buyer, and it generally actually only supports one tier of the supply chain, the tier 1 suppliers. So you're actually only going to get cash into the top of your supply chain. Again, going back to that risk of you don't know exactly what's happening in the bottom of your supply chain. Generally, it leverages a buyer's credit rating to access the capital. And the seller can benefit because they have the option to sell the receivable for early payment. However, the whole process again is initiated by the buyer. Finally, there is various sources of funding for supply chain finance. Now, looking at supply chain funding, there is a few differences between the two. So with this one, it can be initiated by the seller or the buyer. It's actually designed from the ground up. It's looking at the way, we're reimagining the way that business payments are worked. Rather than just always looking at the buyer, let's look at the seller as well and make it a tier by tier solution. You can go up and down the supply chain on multiple tiers. Now, this is very important because rather than just getting the cash to tier 1 suppliers, you want that to flow throughout the whole supply chain. Finally, it's a single source of capital, so there's no need to raise capital for each program. And more specifically looking at URICA, it's a no debt solution. So it is actually a cash solution for your supply chain. So just going back to the research again, SMEs face pressure when buying and selling. Ultimately, this is because the seller wants cash upfront to manufacture goods and services, whereas the buyer wants to hold on to the cash to grow their business. Now, URICA is the way to get paid, to wait, pay, and be paid. It's a solution for both. It's a win-win situation. Hold on to that cash resources for your business to grow your business. So let's look at URICA specifically. So what is URICA supply chain funding? URICA supply chain funding is a global solution for businesses. It's funding and insurance. So how it works, we're powered by Euler Hermes, one of the world's largest trade credit insurer. So rather than just funding all the invoices, we're actually insuring them as well. So there's no risk. You can fund entire supply chains on multiple tiers. It enables businesses to take back control of their business and hold on to their cash, whilst URICA releases the cash into your business for you. There's no need for debt, and the reason for that is because we've got Euler Hermes credit insurance. There's no long-term contract at all. It's ultimate flexibility. Use URICA for one invoice and never again, or use them for all. It's completely up to you. It's your business, not ours. And finally, it's risk-free growth without debt. You don't want debt in your supply chain going back to the Achilles heel of business. That's not what you need. It's no recourse, so it's no recourse to the seller. It's cash with no catches or comebacks. We take on the recourse for you. And from the buyer point of view, you can use it to get extended credit. Your suppliers might not need to receive early payment, but you could grow your business by using the extended credit side. And finally, it's fast. You can sign up today and get cash for your invoices. So how does URICA actually work? So there's two solutions. So firstly, we've got the UriCash and UriCash Export. So what this is, it's the early payment solution side of URICA. You might come to URICA because you want early payment on your invoices. So first of all, you would add your customers to the platform, upload your invoice, and what URICA does, it would generate a real-time price on that given invoice. We have single invoice cover through our insurance, so you can use it with one invoice and never again. And it's a dynamic risk model, so it's a dynamic pricing model as well. So once your invoice is uploaded, it's automatically sent to your customer. It's all dynamic and real time. Once your customer is happy with the invoice, they simply accept the terms and conditions via a one-time digital signature and click approve. Once the customer is approved, URICA will pay you 100% of the invoice value, and that's in cash, there's no debt, minus our all-in fee. Roughly, typically the fee is around 1.5 to 2%, but again, it depends on various different factors. It depends on your size, it depends on the size of your customer, the credit period that you take, and also the country. So it is a dynamic pricing model, but roughly we say around 1.5 to 2%. That's for 30 days credit, and then it will just double depending on the credit period. Now, on the flip side, we've got the reverse. We've got the URI cashback, and that is basically just the reverse, which is initiated by the buyer rather than the seller, because they want to use URICA to pay their suppliers, whether that's early or just on time, and maybe receive extended credit as well. There's different ways you can actually use URICA. So what we would do there, we would actually allocate a whole credit limit for your company, and then you would invite the suppliers of your choice. Again, you can invite one supplier or you can invite many. It's completely up to you. Your suppliers would then upload the invoices to our platform for your approval. You can take the fee or your supplier take the fee. Again, it's a very flexible product. You use it however you want to use it. And then once you're happy with the invoice, you simply accept the terms and conditions via one-time digital signature and click approve. So once it's approved, we'll pay your supplier when you want and when your suppliers want as agreed. We will not interfere in your relationship. And then you settle with URICA as agreed. So finally, how does supply chain funding actually improve liquidity in the supply chain? Now, what's important here is to remember that supply chain funding is cash, it's non-debt. So it's providing early payment across multiple tiers, giving sellers immediate access and prompt payment, whilst buyers can actually benefit from the extended credit side. And it actually removes the need for businesses to factor as well their customers outside the supply chain. Factoring is a debt solution that might be fine for your business, but if you do want a cash solution, it's worth looking at supply chain funding. It's removing the risk of all external problems affecting the strength of your supply chain. So what is the impact that supply chain funding has on your business? So ultimately, it is all about cash. There's cash for both the seller and the buyer in this solution. Cash is king ultimately for your business, and that is what you need for your business to survive. So for the seller, it increases obviously the cash reserves. It's a flexible way to manage the cash flow, and it injects money into the business when it's needed. Again, you can use URICA once or all the time. It's completely up to you. You might just need it on the odd occasion to inject that cash into your business. So cash is for growth and expansion. Now, with regards to the buyer, it maintains their cash reserves. Why doesn't URICA pay your supplier on behalf of you and you pay when you're ready? It improves the cash position of the supply chain, and again, just growth and expansion. It's going back to that growth and expansion for your business. So the final question before we move to the Q&A is more about how do you choose a finance provider for your supply chain? Which finance provider is right for you? So the questions you really need to ask yourself is there security or collateral required? Is that what you want? Do you want to give security? In some cases, you might be fine to give personal guarantees. With regards, if you're going back to URICA doesn't ask for any personal guarantees or security. The risk and the security is our credit insurance that we hold, and it's a non-recourse product. Once we offer the cash to you, there is no catches or comebacks. Is it a debt product? Again, you might be fine with a debt product. It depends what works for your business. It's your business, not ours. As I said, URICA is a cash product, so it's just finding that solution that suits you. Who will be collecting the money from? Our customer. Again, we're a non-recourse product, so we take over that risk and we will collect the money from the customer. However, certain solutions, you might hold on to the recourse. Will I need to repay if my customer doesn't pay? Again, that all depends. If the customer has approved the invoice and is happy with the invoice completely, then no, you don't need to repay because we take over that risk. How much money will I get paid if I use an invoice finance solution? Well, we just have our one all-in fee. As I mentioned, typically for 30 days, it's around 1.5 to 2%. But again, it would depend all on your business. There's lots of different parameters. So if you are interested in finding out about the fee and a bit more about URICA, do get in touch on that side. And then finally, do you understand all the fees applied? You know, we have one fee, there could be many fees with different solutions. That's okay. You just need to find out exactly what fees you're getting charged. So with regards to the webinar side, that's all we've got for today on how supply chain funding is resilient and how it helps supply chains and how it helps alleviating pressures in the supply chain. So we've just got time for a Q&A now, about 4 or 5 questions, I think. So let me just have a look at the questions that have been submitted. Okay, so we've got one here, and so how much will it cost me? So let's go back to the cost again. So as I said, we've got a dynamic pricing model. It's all dependent on the risk. So we look at the risk of your company, we look at the risk of the buyer. The lower the risk, the cheaper the price, and also the credit terms. So if you're, say, you want 120 days credit, so URICA offers maximum 120 days credit, that would be more expensive than, say, the 30 days credit. It depends what you want to do. If you do want to know a little bit more about the solution and the fees, do get in touch with us. We've got info at URICA just at the bottom. So we've got another question here. Let me just have a look. Is it sector specific? Good question, actually. No, it's not at all. So URICA is not sector specific at all. We work in all sectors. Predominantly we've got manufacturing, construction, creative. However, we go from pharmaceuticals to automotive. One of our main in the automotive sector is Norton motorcycles, and actually Norton motorcycles use it up and down the chain. So they'll use the URICash solution for early payment when they export their bikes, but also the URICashback solution to pay their suppliers for manufacturing the motorcycles. So next question. Do you take personal guarantees or a charge over my business? No, we don't. So URICA will never actually ask for personal guarantees or security. Reason behind that is we have the credit insurance, and that is our security, and we take over the risk. So we would never actually ask for that. There are other solutions who would ask for personal guarantees, but URICA isn't one of them. Can I get funding in Mumbai? So actually, yeah, we do work in India. We work in about just over 100 countries. We can actually send over, if anyone is interested in looking at our map, we can send over the country map for you. At the moment, we do exports and imports as well. So we're looking at Hong Kong, we're looking at Asia, the Middle East. Specifically, it's in the UK, but we do work in over 100 countries. Okay, we've got time for one more question. So, are there contracts involved? So, no. So, with regards to contracts, it's an invoice by invoice product. So, how it works when you upload an invoice to the system, you're making a contract on that invoice basis. There is no long-term contract that you're tied into. You could use URICA for one invoice and never again. The contract is between URICA and yourselves, and then that's activated when the buyer approves the invoice. So that's just that one contract per invoice. But when it comes to an overall arching agreement, no, we don't have that with URICA. Let me just see if there's time for one more. Do I have to register my buyer? How it works really, first of all, the supplier would register with us. It's not so much that they register, it's more they would have to approve the invoice via our platform. Now, how they do that, it's not they have to log into a platform. They have to click a link in an email that's automatically sent once you've uploaded your invoice. And then they would view all the invoice and the terms and conditions. Once they're happy with that, they would simply click approve, click the terms and conditions, and then you would receive payment on the day you have selected. So it's not so much that they register, but they are aware of the actual solution in place. We have got a lot of communication that we send over to you in the process, which basically a really good template letter that says what URICA is, how we're helping, that we're a cash solution, what changes, what doesn't. There isn't much change apart from that approval point. And to be honest, if they're getting extended credit and not having to pay you, say, on day 1 or day 30, there's really no issues around it. But all of this information, if you would like more around that, please do get in touch, because we have a lot of collateral that we can send over to you. Now, what we're going to do, this is recorded, so we're going to send this out to everyone, and anyone who hasn't actually attended, we will be sending it out. If you have any questions, get in touch. It's info@urica.com. And again, we are on social media, so it's @URICA Limited and #URICA Moment. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Pippa Greenwood, Head of UK Trade at URICA, and I'll see you soon. Thanks so much.